Amino Lion Media presents Business First.
Hi all, and welcome to another episode of Business First with Sonia Aline. I am your host, and this is a podcast where we hope that, if you've been following us and listening for any length of time, that it has been an inspiration in your journey, that it has helped you in terms of getting your business bigger, better, and stronger in the marketplace that you serve. Today we have a wonderful guest, another wonderful guest for you, and his name is Christopher Augmon of the Christopher Augmon brand. Funny enough, last week we talked about beauty. This week we're talking about fashion. And what's unique about Chris's journey is how he's managed and developed a strong brand in the high leather goods industry and the fine jewelry industry. Welcome, Chris. How are you?
Beautiful. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Thank you for joining us. And, I've heard your story several times, but I'm anxious for our audience to hear it because it's you've been involved in a number of different things. You've had corporate experience, you have strong marketing, sales, branding experience, and now you are an entrepreneur and you've launched several brands. When we featured you years ago, it was around your fine leather goods. And since then, you've added jewelry. And it's not an easy business. High fashion is not an easy business. It's a very competitive business, particularly since people are connected to brands. People are very loyal to brands. And so I'm interested to hear about your story in terms of how you got interested even in fashion at all, from how you transferred from your corporate job to developing these great brands in fashion.
Well, let me first of all say that I'm a big fan of yours. It was so amazing meeting you. I think it was like 10 years ago in New York, Upper East somewhere at someone's boutique that I think it was, I don't know if it was Spike Lee. Someone had teed up someone that teed up you that got us a space. Or I forget how we met. Well, I called you, we connected, but you've always been very special to me, and I've love your journey. So I'm a fan of yours.
Oh, thank you, Chris. And I wish, we're going to ask everyone to go to your site, augmon.com, so that they can actually take a look at some of your work. How did you start this journey in fashion, particularly from your corporate job where you weren't a fashion guy. You worked in a number of different industries, but how did you make the transition from corporate day job to developing these great brands in fashion?
I think that I've always been fashion. So younger, I modeled a while. I modeled a little bit in New York and then Chicago. And I ended up putting myself through school, thank God, waited tables, did the whole thing that what, models normally might do. Started academics and working in corporate America in radio, actually in radio sales, right? I'm the type of guy, till this point, I hustle. I love to work. I think for me, the things that I do, I think when I met you, I had dabbled in a few things of leather goods. I went overseas and I started talking with some manufacturers, and they were telling me, oh, we could make things and they could make couture things for me, and meaning one-of-a-kind items. So I started messing with that, and it was very difficult because I was having a difficult time with leather goods, with sizing and with quality control and pricing and et cetera. And it had a language barrier. So when I launched this leather collection of jackets, pants, which things that are very passionate to me and very passionate to at the time, my ex-wife, they looked amazing, but I was having a difficult time managing here in the States and then managing overseas. And then the quality control wasn't really what I wanted it to be. And then pricing kept changing and fluctuating when I was ready to launch. So one of my mentors years ago said, Chris, why don't you do bags? And I'm like, bags? She said, yeah, women are carrying tons of bags. And I'm like, okay. And she says, you have a bag. And this is like 13 years ago, even before they would start calling them messenger bags. I would carry like a satchel or something, right? Just to put my phone in it. And, you know, I was wearing like size 13 women sandals because they didn't have sandals back then. And then men started doing, right, open toe. And so I've always been kind of ahead of the curve in fashion. So I thought, all right, let me do bags. Well, I was working in corporate America and I started trying to get educated in fashion. So I took a couple classes in costing and fashion. And then I ended up hiring a teacher and then a CAD person to launch this new handbag collection. And within this, I was still a bit in corporate America. Well, I'm like, okay, let me just try this full time. And then I thought, you know, let me put all my energy and devotion into this. And I started working every day with the teacher that I would pay, you know, hourly, and the CAD worker. And goodness, a year later, launched like a handbag line.
Yeah, and you know, how do you launch a handbag line? I mean, even when you think about, you know, launching fashion today, or if you think about launching a t-shirt, you know, if you put something cute on someone and, you know, and it can go viral, or you can get enough people to look at it on social media, you can get some traction. But how do you get in an environment, right, when high fashion, there's some really strong high fashion names that already exist. How do you now come along with a line and suggest that women carry that bag?
Okay, excellent question. So within the hiring of a teacher, and this is nothing against fashion school, against education, because I believe in academics. I have a degree. It's not in fashion, but I do believe that education, academics, and the networking of a school is very important for anyone if they're able to go to school. However, 90% of what I learned in fashion wasn't really what the teacher taught me, to be honest with you. I learned it when I went up to New York and walked the streets of 7th Avenue and going into meeting the manufacturers. And, you know, I was meeting handbag manufacturers that were doing Nancy Gonzalez bags, Marc Jacobs bags, Cole Haan bags. And these were amazing, amazing, talented manufacturers. And I really learned the business through trial and error, through working with them. So I decided to launch this handbag line under my name, and I created a logo, I created etc. And at the time, the brand and inspiration really was quality and luxury. And I just wanted to kind of stop there for a moment and then sort of talk about the evolution of, to your point, you know, how does it become a brand from that standpoint when no one knows you and you have all these other competing brands that they're out there that have amazing traction. And at the time, I had a few PR people that helped launch me to get my cachet up. I ended up calling a lot of the magazines myself and got interviews and got in press. My first celebrity was Zoe Saldana through a network. It wasn't through a PR firm. It was me just hustling, really, because I believed in my product. I believed in my brand and my quality, impeccable, packaging, amazing. So women were buying my things. I launched at a boutique, at a spa boutique near the Ritz-Carlton. And women would come in, you know, $600, $1,200 on a bag. Women loved them, right? They were, at the moment, Sonia, designer bags, small designer bags were kind of cool and trendy because they were unique to what most women were kind of buying from a brand perspective, right? The brands weren't necessarily, in my opinion, weren't coming out with anything that was kind of, you know, edgy and very, you know, connecting and speaking to them, you know, from an urban standpoint and street. So I was able to kind of come in with a lane, and women were like, wow, we really like this. The quality is amazing, color's amazing, textures, colors, and launched like a collection of 13 handbags in a spa. And like my first month, I did like 5 figures in sales just by women, you know, buying my bags and custom making bags. Mm-hmm. So interesting enough, you remember 2008, right? What was probably the biggest factor that happened in 2008, if you can remember? 2008.
Oh, that was the recession and the election, right? The election of the first black president as well. There was a lot going on in 2008.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I launched a bag called 44 that was red, white, and blue, a limited edition bag of only 44 bags numbered inside. I mean, it went really well, right? But back to your question, building a brand, well, recession hit and it hurt me as a small designer because now people were holding onto their money and they weren't the discretionary money that people might have had to want to invest into a designer bag didn't exist. A lot of brands were bringing their prices down, and people were like, well, why am I buying a Chris Augmon bag at $600 or $1,200 when the brand name I could go buy, Louis Vuitton? Well, these big brands started really promoting themselves and collaborating, right, with these amazing artists, with Marc Jacobs, with Kanye West, right, with all these iconic brands themselves. And they were co-partnering, with these designers and these people and these celebrities that really helped build up their brands. And if you think about, some of the amazing, handbags that are out there, Hermes, people all, talking about getting a Birkin bag, right? We're having celebrities wear their things, and we, as a society, we get enticed by that. Right? We see that, okay, wait, Sonia has a Chanel bag and she gets photographed in it. And I really like Sonia. So let me kind of follow that. She has cachet. She has a cachet bag. And then bags, right? The name brand became more important, really.
Right, than the quality of the bag.
Because I'm a big fan of, those brands that are out there. I'm happy that, the success that they've had. But with a smaller designer, it kind of put me almost... I had to adapt. I had to pivot, So that then was the evolution of let me really understand what's happening here and how I can pivot and how I can adjust. Where designer bags were no longer, in my case, they weren't really pulling profit. People weren't necessarily buying them. And because I had high quality.
And talk a little bit about the quality, like the types of leathers, so that the audience has an understand when we say high-end luxury bags, what was the quality? And I remember there were very specific things about your bag that made it unique and made it a high-quality bag.
Right. So the tanning process, or the process of which you would take leather and have it processed within the best quality, has to be done in countries that have not only the experience, but the equipment and the machinery to do that, as well as the, in some cases, the livestock that's healthy. So in this order, I believe, are the best sort of manufacturers and countries that have the best quality leathers. Italy and South America. And I think third would be America. Leathers, again, that's just my opinion. Where you get a leather that is very well tanned, very high quality, has amazing longevity. So all these things I researched and before I would put a bag together, and then I would look at the hardware. So because Switzerland, right, where the Swiss watch is from, has the best navigation, all my zippers were like Riri. There are two different companies, Lambda out of Italy, and then there's Riri, that have the best quality zippers, I think, in the country, at least in my opinion. So I would have the best hardware, I would have the best leathers, and I would have, in New York, the best manufacturers do my bags. And, with compartments, with dual zippers, I would even have them with like 18 karat plated zippers. All the zipper tape would match the color of the bags, right? Custom zippers. Right. Even till this day, like if you go to some of the retail stores in New York, and I won't name these, but they kind of took a little bit of the direction I was going, right? And they started having, because I would buy these big rolls of zippers for my bags. And now they have, in stock, tons of different colors, for people to buy. Not a roll, but like, something for a custom bag where designers could go and just choose from them. Well, I was going direct to Riri, and they were sending me, these big rolls of zippers that were Symmetrica zippers, real silver zippers, right? I mean, my bags are very, very luxury.
No, absolutely. And like I said, for the audience to get a sense of, when you say high quality, and the brands that you're competing with, it was a lot for a small business to be able to manage, particularly after 2008, when where there was less, there was less money to spend on luxury items.
Yeah, people weren't necessarily, quality having quality was one thing, but having quality with a kind of no-name designer where that person wasn't really getting that, that affirmation was very difficult. So I end up being in the elevator in New York. And I remember having one of my bags. Sonia, I'm literally in the elevator, one of the hottest manufacturing places near Parsons and FIT. I'm in the elevator and his brother looks at one of my bags. He's like, "Oh, is that one of your bags?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm thinking I'm real cool, right? He's like, "Yeah, come up and see me." And I'm like, "All right." I says, "What do you do?" He says, "Well, I manufacture accessories." And I'm like, all right. So I had a moment. I went up and saw him, and I saw his studio, and I'm like, wow, look at this belt. This is crazy. He says, yeah, I manufactured belts for Jason Wu and I'm like sitting there salivating because the quality, the textures, the colors, the hardware was just amazing, right? So within this guy, he started asking me, Chris, what are the manufacturers doing with the waist of your handbags? And I'm like, I don't know. He says, did you request it? And I'm like, no. He says, look at all these accessories that I have here. And I'm looking at it, and he says, this is really from leather that is coming from, other people that are making things that they don't need the leather. So I'm like, are you telling me these are scraps? He says, yeah. And he said, and I started asking him, well, what can you do with these? He says, look at these bracelets. Look at and the guy, and this is what I love about New York, Sonia, like you've never asked me for a dime. Not that I would have a dime to give you. Never asked me for a luxury item. There's no quid pro quo. Hey, Chris, you do this. I'll do this for you. Hey, you do this interview for me, Chris. Hey, I'll promote your brand. You do it for the love of the game. I'm not saying that all New Yorkers are that way, but these brothers and sisters of all nationalities, right, do it for the love of the game. And this brother taught me, Sonia, about belts, about collars, about bracelets, about chokers, about one of the best. I just talked to him today. One of the best manufacturers, I believe, in New York, and a designer. So talented. And then I started learning accessories, right?
And so that was your pivot. Your pivot was, you know what? I'm going to move from these handbags and I can do accessories.
Well, if you think about a collection, right? If you think about the totality of a brand, you have a handbag, but you also have something else to go with it, right? So people buy a handbag, they buy a bracelet, right? It's kind of the psychology of it. People aren't so brand conscious when it comes to accessories as they are, well, handbags. Yeah. And the scale of an accessory, right? When he was telling me the prices, and then the quality, he said, Chris, this is my pricing of the manufacturer. Well, I already had the materials for my handbags. So I thought, let me transition this, my brand into not only handbags, but to accessories. And then I go into one of the manufacturers and I'm like, oh, wow, okay. Who do you work with? She said, oh, Chris, well, we work with Oscar de la Renta. We work with, some of the biggest brands in the world. And Sonia, I'm just sitting there, like you and I talking, like these manufacturers are working with Chris Augmon that nobody knows, and my same manufacturers do Oscar de la Renta's designer jewelry. And she again coached me. Not that I took from, because I don't do that as a designer, and I don't like people that do that to me. But I started with my own inspiration, right? I started to grow as a designer, understanding what my inspirations were, what were my passions, what are things that as a collection that I could own that could speak to other people, hoping that they would appreciate it, right? I had to go into like this deep artist thing of how am I separating myself from everyone else, right? So I started combining things, a little bit of handbag to my accessories. Like I came out with these bracelets that had zippers on them, a metal that did really, really well. Well, cut long story short, with accessories, I got a showroom in New York, and I was in as many as 35 boutiques around the country. People were loving my accessories. Okay, now the business had to kick in, because now I'm looking at, okay, I got a showroom in New York. I'm in 35 boutiques. How's my business going to scale? Right? And scale just means how is it going to be able to grow, be sustainable to the degree to whereas when these recessions do hit, your company will be able to sustain it, and your company has the ability to grow. Well, all those things, because I had experience in corporate America, because I had listened a lot, and thank God, I started getting knowledge of business. I was seeing that, well, accessories, and I'm telling you like all my secrets, man. And I know, but if one person hears this, it's cool. I was like, I'm not making any money. I'm in 35 boutiques. My profit is like, I'm having to pay the showroom. I'm having to store the boutiques. I'm selling things wholesale. I'm like, 35 boutiques. It's still, I'm not making a profit. And, it's cool having people wear your things. It's cool selling in the stores. But I mean, I'm not a non-for-profit, even though I started a foundation. But even that has to be profitable. So I'm like, this is crazy. I'm working really hard, and why can't I make money at this? A lot of my peers were, God, if you name the store, there are two guys, Rag and Bone. So I'm at Saks, and I meet them right as they were launching, right? And two really handsome dudes, met their wives. I think I met their wives. But anyway, they were brothers. And a lot of my peers were like growing, like blowing up. I'm like, Rag and Bone, right? One of the biggest brands now that you could imagine. Well, little Chris is still kind of, going along and et cetera. And I had one of my clients, right as I'm sitting down, I'm actually going to meet her today. One of my first fine jewelry clients says, Chris, can you do a bracelet for me? I'm like, well, I don't know. She says, well, this is what I want it to kind of look like, or at least the inspiration from it. And I said, well, this is diamond. She says, yeah. I said, well, I've never really worked with diamonds before, but I bought my mom some, I bought my ex-wife diamonds, and I work with metals because I knew metals in New York, but let me give it a hump. Where'd you see that you liked it? And I'm not going to name the company because they don't need any marketing from my standpoint. But I called them and they said, oh, wow, we made a mistake on the website. It's not 1 carat. It's actually 10 carats. I'm like, oh, okay. When they don't put pricing, on things, whether it's a menu, whether it's a car, whether it's jewelry, good and well, it's probably going to be something that's expensive, right? So I'm like asking, oh, okay, what's this bracelet cost? Because she had taken it. They're like, oh, it's like $55,000. I'm like, what? And I'm like, wow. I call my friend. I'm like, this bracelet you want, it's like 55 grand. She's laughing. She says, yeah, but just do the best you can. So I'm like, all right. So I give it a go, and I start learning the fine jewelry business in Chicago. Same thing, hustling, being really nice, right? I'm a nice guy, Sonia, right? I could bug the heck out of you, but I have a pretty good disposition, and I try to respect everyone, right? So manufacturers, again, coaching me, teaching me, and I'm following directions. And before you know it, 3 months later, it took me 3 months, right, to come up with this bracelet, when it really should take maybe a custom bracelet that's diamonds, maybe 2 weeks, 3 months. And I was really careful about the process, right?
And you're learning the process.
Right. I mean, keep in mind, this is a pretty expensive bracelet, right? So when I got my cost, I thought, oh my God, this is pretty close. This is what? And I'm going to sell it for what? And I thought, from diamonds, gems, gold, metals, precious, just by me saying that to you, not only does it have a luxury appeal to it, but it also has a prestige value to you. Would you agree? I said, Sonia, I'm going to get you a diamond necklace. You probably, just from the mere fact of me saying diamond, you wouldn't necessarily care the quality, the cut, the color, but people should be educated to that, right? So anyway, cut long story short, I thought, wow, this is something that I could do. And then I started getting assignments. People, as I posted things, people were like, oh, Chris, can you do my engagement ring? Oh, Chris, can you do, these custom bracelets? And hence launched CA Fine Jewelry, along with my accessories, along with my handbags.
What I was thinking is, your transitions have all been interesting, and you've been really fortunate to always find the mentors, to always find the support, to always find the right person to say, hey, have you tried this? And what would you attribute that to? It seems like it's been a very, and of course, as an entrepreneur, we know that there have been bumps and there have been scrapes, but in terms of you being able to move from, one product to expanding what this brand looks like, you've been able to attract all the right people and all the right support. And so, what would you attribute that to? And what advice would you suggest to someone who would want to do something along what you're doing and has no idea either where to get started or how to transition to another stage?
Well, one, I don't believe in luck. I work exceptionally hard. I'm a Christian, and not to get into my spirituality, but for a moment, will say I do give God and the Lord all praise for where I'm at today and where I was yesterday and where I might be tomorrow or later tonight. I'm so thankful for that. That's number one. Number two, I will always be a salesperson. I'm not afraid to kick down a door. I'm not afraid to ask someone, hey, what are your thoughts? I'm not afraid to, I fear things, but networking, information, I love doing it. I love the process. The rejection, I've had so much rejection, Sonia. I've had contractors when in the beginning were like, we don't think you're right for us. Broke my heart, right? Chris, come get your things and get out of here. I'm like, damn, that's pretty harsh. But you see, they see me now, and it's a little different story. But in the beginning, it was hard. A lot of mistakes, a lot of money, right? So I would say, the definition of someone that's smart, you learn from your mistakes, right? That's someone that's smart. Okay, someone that's wise, Sonia, you learn from other people's mistakes.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? So I, in turn, try to be wise and learn and ask questions of some of my peers and some of the other manufacturers and my customers, right? I had to get feedback from them on not only, what they like, but, even the pricing. Hey, are you okay with this pricing? Right. I would though, to your point, I'm not to say that I'm an accessible guy, but if your listeners ever want to, you'll have my email address. If they ever want to just reach out and ask a question, I'm more than happy to do that. I think the game now has changed so much. The game fashion's not what it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, especially with this pandemic that, we're, thank God, getting over.
How would you say that it has changed for people who are either in it now or wanting to go into fashion?
Well, the big brands have really swallowed up, have had the resources to not only co-partner with amazing people, right, but to continue to take risk and to do things that, are relevant to the evolution of fashion and style. Someone that's a small brand, like me, my risk, I might take risks, but my recovery is not as great as, someone that has an unlimited, amount of capital that they can continue to do things for. So I have to really make sure that as I do things, they convert, that they sell. And my brand, let me go back to the beginning, because I had to really grab onto something that was what I feel was my own for my brand and my company. And I did that because someone challenged me to go deep into what my brand stood for. Not just C. Augmon or Augmon, but my brand and my mission is to inspire and give back. I've worked over 25 years with youth and underserved communities, and that's really my passion, right? I'm involved in Chicago and, the unrest that's going on in our world and country. I've been to protests. 4th of July, I was out riding my bike 12 o'clock at night when a lot of the kids were out, just to kind of feel what was happening, in our city. But that's really my passion. So I drew something of my company that no matter what happened, no matter if I got a dime, no matter if anyone bought anything from me, I would be inspired and I could inspire other people from it. And I was fortunate enough, to have people challenge me on that, right? It hurt. I had a guy tell me, Chris, you need to blow up your entire company. Take 3 months and figure it out. And this is a dude that knew celebrities.
What was he thinking that you were doing wrong?
He said there was no reason anyone would buy your things, Chris. No reason. So
no reason.
I had let this guy right in my house thinking we're buddies. And he said to me, Chris, not only am I not going to introduce you to anybody, but you're doing this all wrong. He knew professional football players, celebrities, and I took that information, as much as it hurt, and started thinking about it. And, having a mission for my company, right, was so important. Having brand awareness, when people bought it, right, there would be some association to it. And because I'm Christian, I started creating things that spoke to me, that have a spiritual sense to it.
Well, I want to go back to this guy for a minute, because I think for anybody listening, there are people who will, there's advice and then there's criticism and there's also constructive criticism, right? And then there's just degradation, right? There's people who just will never say anything nice about you for whatever reason, or they just don't believe in your dream. And so when do you know that, this is advice or this is just somebody's opinion and I'm not going to be affected by that?
Yeah, for me,
because depending on who that comes from, you either take that in and say, you know what, maybe I need to just blow this thing up and start all over again. Or you go, F him. Like, I know what I got here and I'm going to keep going. And so how do you distinguish? And that's a question for everybody. And I think it's a case by case thing, but how do you actually distinguish what's real and what's like somebody's opinion?
Well, because it's someone's opinion, obviously it's how they feel. And for me, it's research and development, R&D of someone's opinion, which I don't have to necessarily change my company because of their opinion. However, it's a review. Let me put it this way. Does it keep me up at night, Sonia, because someone said something bad about Christopher? I don't want to put up a sign through my hand because the listeners can't see that, but I would. And I'm not going to do that to you, but my heart is you. But in the meantime, I heard what they said. The delivery might not have been the best that, how they wanted to tell me, right? I understand that people have strengths and weaknesses of how they speak to people or how they criticize. Sometimes it's like it's like a storm. The other time it's done with finesse and cushioned statements. And well, unfortunately, when you design things and you make things for people that are public and you're kind of a public person, it all comes. So I listen to him. But again, one of the most important things that he mentioned to me and that I've learned is the mission of your company. Why are you doing it? What is the why?
What is the why?
I sometimes, talking about diamonds and gold, it's boring. I'm sorry, I love fashion, but I don't need to be talking about fashion 24/7. But I love style. I love the process, but it doesn't drive my business. What drives me, again, is getting back to why I do it and how I'm able to inspire the people through my designs and through me contributing to every time someone buys something from my company, I give back to a not-for-profit, a foundation, or something in some way or another, in kind, money, volunteering. My company and my team of people, right? We're very, very philanthropic, and we think about giving back. How can we help elevate other people? And not just with words, but financially. Last year, through a global pandemic, I supported 6 different foundations and charities, right? Cut checks, volunteered and in-kind donations to 6 different charities. Right now, it's probably 2, and that will increase, later during the year. But that was important for me, right? As a guy that is my passion. I wanted to show my appreciation to the community, and the community is very important for me. So yeah, we would support causes, that are cancer related, that are, United Way New York, I supported in some cases, right? I love New York.
What is your why? A big part of your why is to give back. But if you had to encapsulate your why, what would that be?
Oh my God, it's to help elevate youth in underserved communities from an entrepreneurship perspective.
And that's why working with these organizations and working with these groups are so important.
Yeah, it's whether it's a sorority, whether it's a company. I was fortunate to become a vendor of Bloomingdale's and Macy's. Not a lot of people, have that cachet or have that opportunity. And it was really interesting. One of the fine jewelry people asked me can you expand on your collection? And I had to look at, the why. I had to look at that guy that was sitting in the chair over there. So, you need to blow your business up. You ain't about blah. And no, I ain't introducing you to nobody. And, walk out and okay, Chris, see you later. I'm like, so, the why had to become so deep. Sonia, if someone tells me, Chris, you ain't about blah, I don't like your designs, you ain't going nowhere, I'm not supporting you. I know people, Sonia, that know professional athletes and that know celebrities, my friends, some of them, God bless them, and I love you. If you ever hear this and my friend, won't give me an introduction, won't say, hey, I know this brother. He's like da-da-da-da-da. But I do it for the why.
I think that's important for people to understand, because particularly at a stage where, we're so influenced by social media, and you can look at, so many people around you and admire and envy, what people might be doing, or wondering why, it's taking so long for you for things to happen to you, or wondering why it's not happening in the same way that it happens for someone else. When you're steeped in your why, right, then you don't really have to be influenced or jolted by any of these exterior things that are happening, or anything that's happening to someone else. You can be really clear that you're on the right path.
Well, to your point, and I stopped looking at, my brothers at Rag and Bone. They're amazing dudes, and I haven't talked to them since their success. I don't think I even know how to reach them, but I'm happy for them. I'm happy for people that elevate, and surpass me. I don't compare myself to my peers. I don't compare myself to Mark Zuckerberg, to whomever that has done so well, to the guy that's just becoming a designer. I'm my own person, and I try to please the Lord. And then I look into myself to see how can I grow, right? Every day though, Sonia, how can I grow as a designer? How can I inspire and give back? And how I can help other youth understand entrepreneurship, not just the tactical part, not just the operations, right? The balance sheets, the P&Ls. The process is why we do it. We enjoy the process, right? And not to say that I enjoy criticism like that guy or, someone that, whatever, but it's more to it than that. It's the purpose. And I think once I sort of discovered that, because everyone has their purposes of why they do things, and it may not be for them. And then things start to kind of create things that speak to that why. And then I start doing things that amplify that even more. And then the rest is just, you start looking at business of how can my profit exceed next month's profit? How can my year be better this year than it was last year? And it's so important, Sonia, and I'll say this to people that are listening. Someone once told me 5 years from now will be determined by the people, your friends in your life currently, the people you meet, and the books you read. So I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly meeting new people. Your friend Brenda Braxton in New York. So
she's amazing.
Yeah, amazing, fun, and we don't want to give her the big head, but yeah, she's cool. I didn't know her never met her, and we've had amazing conversations on business and some other brothers and sisters up in Harlem, in Chicago and LA. I just talked to a stylist in LA, this brother Jamar, and I'm constantly, one of my first clients is coming over so we could brainstorm about third and fourth quarter. I pick her brain, right? She is so unassuming, but one of my a big, I just listen. And sometimes I don't enjoy what I hear, right? I like hearing that, Chris, you're fabulous, you're handsome. I want to hear all that, but I don't get caught up into the clutter. It's so funny, a really funny story. And I shouldn't tell you, but I will. So I'm driving in my car. It's an 86 Cadillac. It's got rust on the sides, right? Like a piece of crap car, but I like it because it was given to me and it's got some sentimental value to it. Well, my dog is in the car and this car pulls up beside me, right? He says, "Hey, Chris, and I'm like, oh, damn, who sees me? But I'm like, who cares? I don't care. It's like, who's this guy? So I look over to and he's one of my peers, right? He does these like huge medallion, diamond, custom pieces. And he's like, "Hey, Chris, when are we going to get together? Let's get together." I'm like, "Yeah, man, we'll make it happen." And I love him because he has a lot of you in him, right? He's successful, but he's got a mission. He's accessible. He's not arrogant. He's just who he is. And I love that in him. And I'm like looking at his car as he passes me, Sonia, and it's like a Bentley, right? So I'm sitting in my car and I'm like, it's Dan Brothers and one of his, luxury automobiles. It happens to be a Bentley. But I drive around in my Cadillac, I don't necessarily get affected again by what people say about me. It kind of hurts, or think about me, which I do listen. But again, I do it for the why. I have the purpose. I have the mission. So if people are listening out there, take a moment. Don't be concerned about the rush of getting it out there. Enjoy the process. Start digging deeper of why you're doing it and network. Right? Talk to people, ask them why they did it. Don't be afraid to I'm not prideful till this day. I'll ask someone, hey, what do I do about X? And if the door slams, guess what? Another one's going to hopefully open up. And
yeah, I thank you. I think that's all wonderful advice. And I think that your emphasis on knowing your why is really important for anyone in business to understand, their existence and how they show up in the marketplace. And I think the other very strong thing that you offered today was, being open to criticism and advice, and no matter how it comes, you can still make your own decisions. Well, you always have to make your own decisions, but you can take everything in and filter everything through and decide what works and what doesn't.
You have to have a strategy. I've gone through 10 or 15 business plans for my company. Getting the roadmap is so important. Having marketing, and you and I have talked about this, having marketing materials that fit your brand, right? Your packaging, your website, the things that connect, that show your credibility, right? All these things are important. My customers are accustomed, right? And let me just say that again. They're accustomed to great service. They're not accustomed to bad quality. They can identify good quality. They can identify, being on time with things, communicating with them, great packaging, great pricing. So I have to know who my demographics are, right? So all these things are again, it's the person's business acumen, continue on that road of growing, right? Reading books, asking other businesses what they do, making mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's where you're reading the books and making sure you stay ahead of the trends, or at least, check and monitor where the trends are going. What are your social media handles?
Christopher Augmon, CHRISTOPHER, Augmon, AUGMON, and you'll see 18K because I have a collection of fine jewelry that's inspired by youth and underserved communities. So 18 youth. It's 18 with my logo that's trademarked. So that's my inspiration. Every time I see that, I get hyped because I know I'm doing something for youth and underserved communities. So that's my handle for Instagram. I'm on TikTok, and then for Facebook, it's Christopher Augmon, again, AUGMON.com. So there's not a lot of us out there.
Right. So if you go to Christopher Augmon, you can see the entire collection and also keep pace with what will be next and all the things that you are involved in.
And more than that, if you just want to ask a question, have somebody to chat with, virtually, you don't need to buy anything from me in order for us to connect.
Thank you so much, Chris. It was great seeing you. A pleasure to have you on. And I'm excited you got to share your journey with our listeners. And to those of you listening, thank you for listening. Thanks for hanging out with us. And drop us a line and let us know how you think about the shows, this particular topic, or anyone else that you'd like to see. Thank you.
Business First is hosted and produced by Sonia Aline. Edited by Ken Johnson. Executive producers, Ken Johnson. Find the Business First podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, or wherever you get your podcasts. The Business First podcast is a Mean Old Lion Media production.